The sun burned fiercely over the land, casting waves of heat across the empty desert. The ground was dry, cracked, and lifeless. The wind carried dust through the air, and even the sky seemed harsh and distant. It was a place where survival was not easy. Where every step required strength. And where every drop of water meant life. In this harsh world lived a woman. Her name was not spoken with respect. Her presence was not welcomed in gatherings. People looked at her with judgment. With distance. With cold eyes. Because her life had been filled with sin. She had made choices that placed her far from the path of righteousness. And over time, those choices became her identity. People did not see her as someone who could change. They did not see her as someone who could be forgiven. To them, she was already lost. But what people see is not always what Allah sees. Because Allah knows what is hidden in the hearts. Days passed like any other. The heat remained. The land remained dry. And life continued without change. Until one day, something small happened. Something that no one around her would have considered important. Something that, at first, seemed insignificant. But that moment would change everything. The woman walked alone across the dry land. The sun above her was unforgiving. Her throat felt dry. Her steps were slow. Because thirst in such heat is not just discomfort. It is pain. A deep, exhausting pain that drains strength with every moment. She searched for water. Scanning the land. Hoping. Waiting. And then she saw it. A well. Simple. Quiet. Standing in the middle of the dry land like a hidden mercy. She moved toward it quickly. Her steps filled with urgency. Because water meant relief. Water meant survival. When she reached the well, she looked inside. There was water. Deep below. Without hesitation, she climbed down. Carefully. Step by step. Until she reached the bottom. She drank. The cold water touched her throat, easing the burning dryness. For a moment, everything felt still. Peaceful. She had what she needed. Her thirst was gone. She could leave. And that could have been the end of the story. But it wasn't. Because as she climbed back up and stepped away from the well, she saw something. A dog. Thin. Weak. Its body showed signs of exhaustion. Its tongue hung out as it panted heavily. Its eyes were tired. Desperate. The animal circled the well, looking down. Just as she had moments before. But unlike her. It could not climb down. It could not reach the water. It could only look. And wait. The woman stopped. She watched the dog. And for a moment, she understood something. That thirst is the same. Whether it is felt by a human or by an animal. That pain does not choose who deserves it. That suffering does not ask about a person's past. The dog continued moving weakly around the well. Its body struggling. Its strength fading. And in that moment, the woman faced a choice. A simple one. She could walk away. No one was watching. No one would question her. No one would blame her. The world already expected nothing good from her. Or she could do something. Something small. Something that seemed insignificant. But something that required effort. She looked at the well. Then at the dog. Then back at the empty land around them. The silence of the desert filled the moment. And within that silence, a decision was made. But what she chose to do next would not only change the fate of that animal, it would change her own fate forever. The desert remained silent as the woman stood near the well, her eyes fixed on the weak, trembling dog. Its breathing was heavy. Its body barely held itself upright. And yet, it continued circling the well, driven by nothing but desperation. The same desperation she had felt just moments earlier. The same burning thirst. The same need for water. She looked at it carefully. No one else was there. No one to judge her. No one to praise her. No one to even notice what she would do next. The world had already turned its back on her. So whatever choice she made, it would be seen by no one. But there is always one who sees. Even when the world looks away. The woman took a step back toward the well. She paused for a moment. Because what she was about to do was not easy. The well was deep. Climbing down once had already taken effort. Climbing down again, under the burning sun, with exhaustion in her body, would be even harder. But the image of the dog did not leave her mind. Its weak steps. Its dry tongue. Its silent suffering. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. A feeling that had not been there before. A feeling stronger than her past. Stronger than her reputation. Stronger than what people thought about her. Mercy. She moved toward the well again. Slowly. With determination. She leaned over and looked inside. The water was still there. Far below. She took a deep breath. And began to climb down. Step by step. Her hands gripping the sides. Her feet searching for support. The heat around her pressed against her body. The effort drained her strength. But she continued. Because now, she was not climbing for herself. When she reached the bottom, she looked at the water. Clear. Still. Life-giving. But there was something missing. She had no container. Nothing to carry the water in. For a moment, she stood still. Thinking. Looking around. There was nothing. Nothing she could use. The desert had nothing to offer. Except what she already had. Then her eyes fell to her foot. Her shoe. Worn. Simple. But something she could use. Without hesitation, she removed it. She lowered it into the water. Carefully filling it. Holding it steady so it would not spill. Then she prepared to climb again. But this time, it was harder. Because now she carried water. Every movement had to be careful. Every step had to be steady. A single mistake. And the water would be lost. She began to climb. Slowly. Her arms strained. Her body weakened. The heat pressed against her. But she did not stop. Step by step. Until finally, she reached the top. She stepped out of the well, her breath heavy, her body tired. The dog was still there. Still waiting. Still weak. Its eyes turned toward her. She moved closer. Carefully. Gently. She knelt down beside it. And with quiet care, she brought the shoe filled with water toward its mouth. At first, the dog hesitated. Then slowly, it drank. The water disappeared quickly. But the change was immediate. Its breathing began to calm. Its body relaxed. Life slowly returned to it. The woman watched in silence. There were no words. No audience. No recognition. Just a moment. A small act. A simple choice. And a life that had been saved. The dog looked at her. Then slowly moved away. Stronger than before. Alive. She remained where she was. Kneeling in the dust. Tired. Exhausted. But something inside her felt different. A calmness. A lightness. As if something had been lifted from her heart. She had done something good. Something real. Not for people. Not for praise. But simply because it was right. She stood up slowly. The desert around her was still the same. The heat. The silence. The emptiness. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had changed. Because sometimes, the smallest actions carry the greatest weight. And what she had just done was far greater than she could ever imagine. Because while no one on earth had seen her act, it had been seen, recorded, and its impact had already reached beyond the desert, beyond the moment, into something far greater, something that would determine her fate, in a way she could never have expected. The woman walked away from the well slowly, her steps heavy from exhaustion, yet her heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. The desert stretched endlessly before her, unchanged. The heat still pressed against her skin. The wind still carried dust through the air. Nothing around her had changed. But inside her, something had shifted. She could not explain it. She did not fully understand it. But she felt it. A quiet calm. A sense of relief. As if something within her had been washed clean. And yet, if anyone had seen her at that moment, they would not have thought anything was different. To the people, she was still the same woman. The woman they judged. The woman they avoided. The woman whose past defined her. Because people often see only what is visible. But Allah sees what is hidden. Days passed. Life continued. The woman returned to her world. To the same paths. The same faces. The same judgments. Nothing around her treated her differently. No one praised her. No one thanked her. No one even knew what she had done. But that was never the point. Because the value of an action is not in who sees it, but in who it is done for. Somewhere far beyond what the eyes could see. Her action had already been recorded. Every step she took. Every moment of effort. Every drop of water she carried. Every intention in her heart. Nothing was lost. Nothing was forgotten. And while she continued living her life, unaware of what had been written for her, the weight of her past still existed. Her sins were not small. They were many. And they were heavy. The kind of sins that people believed could never be erased. The kind of sins that made others lose hope in her. And perhaps, even she had once lost hope in herself. But there is something about mercy that does not follow the expectations of people. Because the mercy of Allah is not limited by what humans think. It is not measured by reputation. It is not blocked by the past. It reaches where it wills. And it can change everything. In a single moment. One evening, as the sky turned dark and the stars began to appear, the woman sat alone. The world around her was quiet. The noise of the day had faded. And in that silence, her thoughts grew louder. She remembered her life. The choices she had made. The path she had walked. And for a moment, a feeling returned. A familiar one. Regret. A deep awareness of everything she had done. Everything she had become. And everything she believed could never be undone. She lowered her head. Because regret can be heavy. Heavier than any burden the body can carry. But then, another thought came to her. A small one. Simple. Quiet. The memory of that moment at the well. The dog. The water. The effort. The mercy she had shown. It was not a great act in the eyes of people. It was not something that would be spoken about. But in her heart, it felt real. Pure. Different from everything else. And in that moment, a door began to open. A door she had not considered before. The possibility that perhaps Allah had seen that act. That perhaps it meant something. That perhaps she was not completely lost. The thought did not erase her past. It did not change her situation. But it gave her something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. And hope can change everything. Because when a person begins to believe that they are not beyond mercy, they begin to see a path they never saw before. A path back. Back to Allah. Back to forgiveness. Back to a life that is not defined by the past, but guided by something greater. The woman sat there in silence, her heart filled with thoughts she could not fully understand. But one thing was clear. Something had changed. Not in the world around her, but within her. And that change was only the beginning. Because what had been written for her, what had already been decided, was far greater than anything she could imagine. And soon, the truth of that single act would be revealed in a way that would leave even the most righteous people in awe. The nights passed quietly, one after another, as the woman continued living her life. To the people around her, nothing had changed. She was still the same person in their eyes. The same past. The same reputation. The same judgments that followed her wherever she went. But inside her, something was no longer the same. The memory of that moment at the well stayed with her. It did not fade. It did not disappear. Instead, it remained like a small light in the darkness. A reminder. A reminder that she had once done something purely good. Something without expectation. Something without recognition. And that memory slowly began to affect her. Her thoughts changed. Her actions began to shift. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But gradually. Because real change often begins quietly. From within. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky softened into shades of gold and red, the woman walked through the same dry land where she had once found the well. Her steps were slower now. More thoughtful. As if she was searching for something deeper than water. She reached the well. It stood there just as before. Silent. Still. Unchanged. She looked down into it. The water remained below. Calm. Reflecting the fading light of the sky. For a moment, she stood there in silence. Then she sat beside it. Her eyes lowered. Her thoughts heavy. She began to reflect on her life. Not as others saw it, but as it truly was. She remembered her choices. The mistakes. The paths she had taken. The moments she had ignored what was right. And the weight of those memories pressed against her heart. But this time, it did not lead her to despair. Because something else was there. Something new. Hope. The memory of the dog. The water. The act of mercy. It reminded her of something powerful. That even someone like her was capable of doing good. That even someone like her could choose differently. And in that moment, she did something she had not done in a long time. She raised her hands. Slowly. Hesitantly. As if unsure. As if wondering if she was even allowed. Then, quietly, she spoke. No one heard her. No one saw her. But her words were real. "O Allah." Her voice trembled. "I have done many wrong things." She paused. The weight of her past filled her heart. "But if you accepted that one act, if you saw what I did, then do not leave me as I am." The words came from deep within her. Not perfectly spoken. Not beautifully formed. But sincere. And sincerity is what reaches Allah. Tears filled her eyes, falling quietly onto the dry ground. She did not know if her words would be accepted. She did not know if she would be forgiven. But for the first time, she asked. And that alone was a change greater than anything before. The sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. Darkness covered the land. But within her, a light had begun to grow. A light of turning back. A light of hope. A light of connection with Allah. Days passed after that moment. And those who knew her began to notice something different. Not something dramatic. Not something that could be easily explained. But something subtle. She spoke less. She avoided certain things. Her behavior changed. Slowly. Quietly. As if she was trying to become someone new. Some people noticed. Some questioned it. Some did not believe it. Because people often struggle to accept change. Especially when it comes from someone they have already judged. But change had begun. And it was real. Not for people. Not for reputation. But for Allah. And what she did not know was that her story had already been written. Her fate had already been decided. Not based on what people thought of her, but based on something much deeper. Something that only Allah sees. Because sometimes, a single moment of sincere mercy can outweigh a lifetime of mistakes. And the truth of that was about to be revealed in a way that would leave hearts shaken. Because what Allah had prepared for her was far greater than anything she could imagine. The desert remained vast and silent, just as it had always been. The wind moved gently across the dry land. The sky stretched endlessly above. And life continued, as it always does. But somewhere within that world, a story had already been written. A story that would not be forgotten. A story not about a king. Not about a warrior. Not about someone known for greatness. But about a woman. A woman whose past was filled with mistakes. A woman whom people had judged. A woman many believed could never change. Yet her story would become one of the most powerful reminders of mercy. Because what defines a person is not always their past, but what they choose to do in a single moment. Time passed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And eventually, her life reached its end. Like every soul, her time in this world came to a close. The moment arrived when she would leave behind everything. Her name. Her past. Her story. And stand before Allah. Alone. Without titles. Without excuses. Without the judgments of people. Only her actions. Only her sincerity. Only what was truly in her heart. And in that moment, everything was known. Every sin. Every mistake. Every hidden action. Nothing was forgotten. Nothing was overlooked. The weight of her past was real. Heavy. Undeniable. But there was also something else. Something that stood among all of it. One moment. One act. One choice. The moment she stopped. The moment she turned back. The moment she showed mercy to a creature that could not help itself. The moment she chose kindness. When no one was watching. And that moment was not small. Because with Allah, no sincere act is ever small. It is narrated that Allah forgave her. Not because she was known among people. Not because her past was clean. But because of that single act of mercy. Because she gave water to a thirsty dog. Because she felt compassion. Because she acted without expecting anything in return. And because her heart, in that moment, was sincere. The woman whom people thought was beyond hope was granted forgiveness. Completely. fully. A mercy greater than anything she could have imagined. And her story did not end there. It became a lesson. A reminder for every generation. That no one is too far from Allah. That no sin is greater than His mercy. And that sometimes the smallest act, done sincerely, can change everything. People who later heard this story were left in awe. Some reflected on their own lives. Some questioned their own actions. Because if such a woman could be forgiven, then what about them? The lesson was clear. Never underestimate a good deed. Never assume that someone is beyond mercy. Never lose hope in Allah. Because His mercy reaches where human judgment cannot. The desert remained as it always was. The well remained in its place. The story faded from the moment. But not from history. Because it carried a truth that would never fade. That Allah looks at the heart. That sincerity matters more than reputation. And that even in a life filled with mistakes, one moment of true compassion can open the doors of forgiveness. And that is the greatest lesson of all. That no matter how far a person feels, the path back to Allah is always open.